Welcome back to Blackthornprod. I'm Noah and this is the very first video of 2020. So here's to a great new year, everyone. We're about to embark on a brand new game creation journey. I'm going to reveal the new project I've been working on, which I believe has great potential and which I intend on finishing and sharing my whole process all the way up into launch with devlog videos, probably on a weekly basis. This way you can get motivated to work on your own world alongside me, and lucky me, I'll hopefully get some useful feedback from you guys to improve what I make. The game doesn't have a name yet, it was simply based off the small Christmas gift I created called Good Vibes. In that tiny experience, players could explore smiling, cartoony planets with what I thought was a neat movement system, sort of like a grapple hook that had a crunchy, responsive feel, and though it was never used for a challenging purpose, I could tell it had lots of potential. So once Good Vibes was out the oven, I began work on a new prototype using this movement system, and yes, you guessed it, the Unity game engine and the C# programming language. My basic idea was to create a tough, pure roguelike. The player would navigate randomly generated planets covered with obstacles, monsters, and loot, and try and reach his destination and delving into increasingly dangerous worlds. After about one day of work, I had something that looks like this. Very bland and simple, but I could get a nice feel for the controls and had some simple enemy characters in place which the player had to avoid, such as this spiky head which remains static and this vicious rotating slime. The player can avoid the enemies or jump into freaking hot flames, and once he's all orange and burning, slam into an enemy which will obliterate the squishy abomination and leave the player unharmed. So the orange fiery player can attack or simply use this as a neat one line of defense, since anything that collides with him will die and the orange protection will simply be removed. This very basic setup already felt pretty fun to play around with. It was simple and again full of potential. I wrote down various ideas for new enemies, powers, planets, and even bosses. The currency I introduced on day 2 is the star. Now, of course, note that all this is just prototype artwork, and as you'll see later on in the video, I completely remade all of this in later days. But as I've said many times before, I think it's awesome to just slam some very quick, ugly art together, code, test, and see if it's interesting or fun, so you don't waste too much time in case it's not. So back to the star. For now, enemies drop some when destroyed, and I also made an ugly gold treasure chest, which will give the player a dollop of stars if slammed into. And I figured stars would be used to buy health upgrades and various powers. I then continued forth, playing around with the level generation. To introduce the player to the game, there's a simple line of planets, which is nice and linear, and then later on things can expand a bit with 3 columns, and hop, I added some angry lava which moves up, pressuring the player to act fast. I want this little roguelike game to be fast-paced and action-packed, so this lava add-on definitely helped with that. From there I enjoyed making a few more enemies, this simple flying creature who moves towards the player when he's close, this jumping spider who hops around a planet, kind of like the player, and finally a toothy maw who shoots projectiles in a straight line. As I spiced things up a tad with rotating spiky blades and deadly planet cores, which forces the player to move around the planet like this rather than skip things like this. Then there's planets that stay still and some that rotate nice and slow. So after a couple days, things were already taking shape. To top it off, I decided to prototype the first boss. Again, just making very quick, crude art in Photoshop. This boss would be called Blackswing, and wielding a giant sword, try and skewer the tiny, puny player. The player hops between 4 movement points, and Blackswing has 2 stages, starting out completely still and then moving about, which makes the fight that little bit harder and nerve-wracking around the end. To damage the boss, the player needs to blast into his face. So a moving one makes it harder to aim. Having thoroughly enjoyed programming Black Swing, I made a second boss, named for now the Rotating Horror. He moves increasingly fast in a circle, hoping to take a fat, juicy bite from the player, who must frantically jump around the arena, dipping himself into fire before slamming into the boss's one weak point, its exposed black heart. So I pushed on, putting into place a simple shop system where the player could spend his star currency to heal, upgrade his health, and at one point boost his damage. This means he could go into multiple flames and go from white to yellow to orange to red to purple, and so would be able to attack multiple enemies at a time without needing to dive into more flames. Turns out this made the game too easy, so I removed that for now. With a solid and pretty fun but very ugly prototype created, I decided it was time to stop adding stuff and instead polish, beautify and improve this small demo version of the game. Making the world look nicer and more interesting would definitely help with motivation later on. Working on something vibrant and, pretty keeps me on my toes, and I'll be less likely to just ditch the whole thing into the trash can. Plus I knew the game was fun at this point and I wanted to see things through all the way to completion, so here we go. I began by changing the player character. I thought this looks pretty cute, but a stylized little fire boy with moving flame-like hair is cooler. Plus it makes more sense now with him jumping into flames and all. I added some details to the planet, so instead of being smooth like this, there's some grass-like tufts and bumps. And of course I do intend on creating many different planets that vary in size and shape, but for now, this is all. Now, like in many roguelikes, there's different areas. For example, in Spelunky, the 4 main ones are the mines, jungle, ice caves, and temple. Well, in mine, there will also be different areas divided into 3 levels. Number 1 will be called the Fields of Golds, which is why I've made a nice yellow, orange, and gold backgrounds, clouds and soft lights and gentle moving planets. However, I felt all the background and foreground detail was noisy and distracting, so I removed it. I created stylized patterns on each planet, which would pop up when the player lands on the planet. This cool effect was made using the sprite mask, which I remind you reveals or hides part of a sprite. So by scaling up a circular sprite mask, I can reveal a neat pattern on each planet. And I made many of these, as you can see here. And so I kept reworking on the art and particle effects and general game feel, trying to get it from basic prototype to something a lot more solid and beautiful and, just tempting to players. I ended up with 3 cool levels for my first area, Field of Gold. And I like the hot lava bubbling underneath the player, which was made with Unity's particle system. I also beautified the vicious first boss, Black Swing. He looks pretty epic now, with a funky sword glistening with blood red patterns that reveal themselves when the sword has been thrust downwards. And then I worked on Area 2, which I think I'll call the Lush Land. For now, different from Area 1 with its green backgrounds and extra columns of planets. It looks nice and unique and clearly different from the initial levels. But hey, many things are likely to change in drastic ways throughout the creation of this game. These are just very early days, of course. Next up, the shop scenes, once ugly and blue, now look like this. There's only 2 shopkeepers for now, one that heals you and another that gives you extra heart capacity. But there's likely to be many more offering the player various power-ups and goodies for a price. And lastly, the Rotating Horror also got his beauty treatment and now looks extra wobbly and vicious. So in not too much time, I began what I think is a very fun little game project, and I can't wait to keep improving and expanding on this world. So in the following days, I'll be continuing work on this demo, then I'll get some people playtesting this very early version for precious feedback. And then, oh boy, I'll just go crazy and add many more enemies, areas, powers, planet types, and secrets this game needs. I think this should be a 2 to 3 month long project, but it's really a little too early to say. For now, I'm focusing on creating, getting a solid, fun little demo into a few players' hands in the following week or two, and seeing where the winds take me. You can support me on Patreon like these fantastic people whom I thank so much. This of course helps me keep making games and videos and losing my mind in the basements. And with that said, let me know how you feel about this new project. Always keep in mind that this is an extremely early stage in development, and that a lot of the stuff shown here will change or be improved. Or let me know what you've begun work on or are currently creating in this new year. Okay, stay tuned for the next video in this devlog series. Cheers.